Hello, everyone. My name is Bardo, and welcome back to another episode of Disney Armchair, the channel where I talk a little about the past, a bit about the present, and a whole lot about the future of the Disney parks. Let me just address the elephant in the room right away. I have not been active on this channel in a very long time. Part of the reason for that is because I was experiencing a very transitional point of my life. I was graduating from college, moving, so on and so forth. The other reason is because, to be totally frank, I was heavily disillusioned with the Disney parks after the fallout from the D23 Parks panel back in 2024. As you may know, I sort of live streamed my reaction to D23 2024 with a few friends on this channel. That was a pretty huge moment for me because I got to see the rumored Dark Kingdom land get confirmed mere months after I made my debut video about it. But most of the Disney Parks news we got after D23 that year was just awful. Mainly the Monstropolis and Piston Peak area expansions really got to me. Well, let me rephrase. The issue was that they weren't really expansions, they were directly treading on very historically meaningful property at Disney World. Monstropolis was a strict retheme of the Muppets Courtyard in Hollywood Studios, and Piston Peak was replacing the Rivers of America in Magic Kingdom. This was extremely controversial for a lot of reasons, mainly because of the aforementioned historical relevance behind the Muppets Courtyard and the Rivers of America, and these lands were also confirmed to be replacements only after D23 had ended, which just kind of shows that Disney knew how much live backlash they were going to receive if they had clarified this on stage. That's all to say, I had literally recorded, edited, and nearly finished a 2024 Disney World vlog, only to can it out of sheer distaste. I completely changed out the vlog audio to a 1-hour unscripted rant where I talked about why these announcements were so controversial to me, but I just couldn't bring myself to post that either. It didn't really help that I also visited Universal Studios Epic Universe and was just absolutely blown away by the state of the park in the meanwhile. So instead of perpetuating the negativity, I just decided to abandon the channel until I could bring myself to make videos about the Disney parks again. Which would happen to be today. A whole 2 years later. So, what changed? Well, first, there were a few minor attraction updates from the past year or so that started to catch my eye again, and made me think that some amount of care was returning to the Disney parks. In particular, I was mostly impressed with Test Track 3.0 for committing to the sort of retro feel of its original incarnation and bringing it back. Keep this idea in mind for later. I was also very pleasantly surprised by the Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets. Originally, I thought this ride retheme was a very lazy way to reduce the backlash of the Muppets Courtyard being turned into Monstropolis. However, since its reopening, I've actually found myself very charmed. The inclusion of the Muppets actually feels really organic on Rock and Roller Coaster, and they even ported over a few gags and references from Muppet Vision 3D, which I really appreciate. The pre-show is a big highlight for me too, especially the scooter animatronic, which just looks so much like a real hand puppet, it really amazes me. Second, Josh D'Amaro became CEO of Disney earlier this year. D'Amaro was previously the head of the parks department and had been doing a lot of good for the parks worldwide. Maybe more importantly, though, he was dethroning Bob Iger, who had been doing a frankly horrible job since returning as CEO in 2022. Honestly, I think Iger's initial run as CEO from 2005 to 2020 was really good. He was responsible for the Disney parks nostalgia that I and many others grew up around, so it's a bit heartbreaking to see that his return only made the company more shallow than Bob Chapek had left it. I was really skeptical of how D'Amaro would handle the company, especially since he was no longer head of parks specifically, but oh boy, did this year's D23 change my mind. I unfortunately missed out on live reacting to D23 2026, partially because I didn't think I'd care at all, but also because it happened on the same weekend as MagWest, and I was busy having a ton of fun running a panel about Toby Fox's music and watching some sick concerts with friends in San Jose. There was some really cool news about stuff like Kingdom Hearts and the MCU, but when it got to the parks panel, there were some announcements where I genuinely did not believe my eyes. So anyway, that's finally enough recapping. Let's dive into why this year's D23 has me wondering if the Disney parks are finally locking back in. So, firstly, I'm gonna skip past a few of the initial announcements about the Carousel of Progress and such. I'm not a big fan of that attraction, admittedly, so I can't really comment on how meaningful the updates it's receiving are. But an attraction in Tomorrowland that I do really like is Space Mountain, and we had two really interesting announcements attached to the versions from Tokyo Disneyland and Disneyland Paris. There was just a bit of news about Tokyo Space Mountain Earthrise, which is a redo of their Space Mountain that I honestly completely forgot was happening. But there was also this absolutely insane announcement that Paris' Space Mountain is finally returning to the original theme. Dear God, I have literally wanted nothing more from Disneyland Paris than this. I literally had an entire video planned years ago when I debuted this channel where I wanted to talk about how disastrous the Hyperspace Mountain retheme was in Disneyland Paris. For context to those who don't know, instead of the traditional Tomorrowland, Disneyland Paris has an equivalent called Discoveryland, which is based on retrofuturism from authors like Jules Verne, hence the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea Nautilus walkthrough attraction, and the Paris Space Mountain being directly themed after From the Earth to the Moon, Columbia, the Space Canon, and all. I am personally a massive nerd about retrofuturism, especially in regards to Jules Verne, so I absolutely adore Discoveryland. The land is also basically the modern incarnation of the cancelled Discovery Bay that was planned for Disneyland in the late 70s by Tony Baxter, who is absolutely one of my favorite Imagineers of all time, but that is a tangent for another video. Anyway, basically, Discoveryland Space Mountain got a really sloppy Star Wars overlay in 2017 that was supposed to be for a temporary event, but it ended up being permanent, and it just frankly ruined the aesthetic of what was otherwise the land's centerpiece. Unfortunately, this Hyperspace Mountain is the only version I've ever gotten to experience. But thankfully, after a whole 10 years of this temporary overlay, Disneyland Paris' Space Mountain is finally returning to its original incarnation. Hell yes. This is kind of what I meant earlier when I said that you should keep Test Track 3.0 in mind during this video. Because I'm not excited about Space Mountain only because I love the aesthetics. I'm excited because it also demonstrates that the Disney parks are willing to walk back poor decisions and refurbish attractions without forcibly modernizing them. When, for the longest time, it was starting to seem like IP representation was more important than thematic cohesion. Second on my list of utterly unbelievable announcements was the reveal that the Disco Yeti from Expedition Everest is finally getting fixed. Or, well, I guess we can't call him the Disco Yeti anymore if he's fixed. Whatever. He'll be the Disco Yeti forever to me. Once again, for those who don't know, the Expedition Everest roller coaster in Disney's Animal Kingdom opened featuring a Yeti animatronic, which at the time was Disney's biggest animatronic ever, and I believe it technically still is. However, the sheer weight and force of the animatronic Yeti was actually threatening structural damage to the roller coaster, so Imagineering made the difficult decision to place the Yeti on a permanent B mode and use strobing lights to slightly imply movement. Hence the Disco Yeti. Even more than with Hyperspace Mountain, this really does feel like Disney Parks management showing that they are now committed to restoring and preserving park culture. Truly, it feels like Disney is aware of how much the detail really matters. This announcement was also very sweet to me because I love the work of Imagineer Joe Rohde, and I'm really glad that his promise of one day fixing the Yeti has finally come to pass.
You know, kind of bulldog this one in a way that doesn't always make it popular, but I will fix the Yeti someday, I swear.
Off the news last night at D23, Joe, the Yeti, in your beloved creation Expedition Everest, is just returning after being broken for so long. Disco Yeti is no more. How do you feel about the Yeti returning?
Oh, I am both relieved and excited about this. I'm also going to be really interested to see how the problem is solved, because remember, I'm retired.
The middle section of the park's presentation was mostly spent on various Marvel attractions and the new Tropical Americas retheme coming to Animal Kingdom. I've had kind of mixed opinions on both these topics for a long time, so I'm gonna try and condense my thoughts. Having a brand new Indiana Jones attraction is pretty interesting, especially as a replacement for Dinosaur, since that old attraction actually has the same track layout as Disneyland's Indiana Jones ride. The Encanto ride is also an interesting idea, but I just don't know how to fully feel about it either. I think Poseidon Entertainment put it best at his D23 breakdown, where he questioned whether either of these attractions really have any relevance to the overall theme of Animal Kingdom. Neither Indiana Jones nor Encanto have any particular themes of wildlife or conservation, especially not when compared to the few other IPs in Animal Kingdom like Avatar. And I think Dinosaur, on the other hand, is going to be sorely missed given that it was the only real representative of extinct animals in Animal Kingdom. That being said, Dinoland USA had to go. A land intentionally themed to crappy roadside attractions didn't deserve to stay. I'm going to stay mostly silent on the Marvel projects for now until some more concrete previews come out for them. Frankly, just not sure what to expect from most of them right now. I will say I'm kind of annoyed that Spider-Man is receiving a second ride that still insists on featuring these dumbass spider bots from Avengers Campus that nobody likes. Hopefully they still have time to pivot to something actually interesting. There was also a bit of attention given to the upcoming Coco boat ride at Disneyland, but like with the Marvel projects, I honestly just don't have much to say about it because there's still so little to look at. It's been confirmed by now that the ride will have some segments in the Land of the Dead, which I'm really looking forward to, but sadly we still have barely any concept art for what this will look like. Hopefully it will feel just as grand as it does in the film. Basically, in regards to everything I just mentioned, maybe don't set any crazy expectations for now. It all looks cool, but for the most part, we'll know for sure when we get there. This brings us to the Piston Peak portion of the presentation. Try saying that 5 times fast. To summarize my thoughts, I am very pleasantly surprised. As I said earlier, I thought Piston Peak was going to be kind of a downer. It seemed like a very unnecessary replacement for the Rivers of America at Magic Kingdom, and it seemed like it would clash pretty hard with the general Magic Kingdom aesthetics that surrounded it. However, we learned a lot more about the contents of the land and got a really nice model of it at this D23. First of all, this place is going to be friggin' huge. And second, if the real land looks anything like this model, it's gonna be stunning. I don't think there's any way around the fact that the modern cars are gonna clash with the vibes of Frontierland, but as far as the environment itself is concerned, I think this is a real winner. I'm actually, very unexpectedly, really looking forward to seeing this land in person. The main e-ticket attraction for Piston Peak has also been relentlessly hyped, but honestly, I'm more infatuated with the way the land itself looks at this point. In hindsight, the Radiator Springs land in California Adventure is also a huge standout, so honestly, I don't know why I expected anything less. Once again, I think this shows that cohesion and tasteful theming is starting to become important to the parks again. While we're on the topic of lands that I previously thought were controversial, I'm also pretty happy with the way Monstropolis is turning out. I mentioned earlier that the Rock and Roller Coaster Muppets retheme was more successful than I had imagined, and to that point, I think I'm ready to accept the loss of Muppets Courtyard. In exchange, we are receiving what looks to be a pretty high-effort recreation of the Harryhausen's restaurant from Monsters, Inc., as well as Disney's first ever inverted roller coaster. This roller coaster also has a ton of innovation going on with its loading section and what I assume will be rotating seats. If Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind is anything to go off of, I think this roller coaster is going to be a smash hit with everyone. Finally, this brings us to the moment I've been waiting for since 2024. We finally got some more info on Dark Kingdom. What the? Villain's Land? What the fuck? Okay, so jokes aside, it's called Villain's Land and not Dark Kingdom. Honestly, I think Dark Kingdom would have been a much better name, but I rest my case. It doesn't really matter that much to me. What I do find really interesting is the concept art that they shared with us this year. This is frankly a lot less to go off of than even the Marvel stuff from earlier, but that's fine. We at least have specific confirmation of a Maleficent roller coaster and a boat ride, which seems themed to all the villains. Based on the teaser text accompanying both pieces of concept art, I really wish we could have seen some behind-the-scenes planning for the ride queues or track layouts. We do have this one model of the roller coaster from Walt Disney Imagineering's YouTube channel, but it's clearly still early in development. There's a lot of speculation to be had about the ride systems both attractions might use as well. I could probably double the length of this video if I went over all of that. Unfortunately, this script is already getting out of hand, so I'll just have to save that for later. I'll be keeping a very close eye on any updates that might come out regarding either attraction in the coming year or so, however long it takes for Villain's Land to be fully realized. Now, in my opinion, some of the craziest announcement at this year's D23 came right at the end. The big one in particular being that Disneyland's Tomorrowland is going to receive a much needed overhaul. This Tomorrowland has needed a facelift since literally forever. Some of its most critical issues, in my opinion, actually tie back to the retrofuturism point I made earlier with Discoveryland. See, Tomorrowland was initially meant to be a constant vision of the future, but it was discovered pretty quickly that it's hard to keep up with the future when it's literally happening all the time. As such, Tomorrowland kind of devolved into just a generic science fiction thing with debatable amounts of cohesion. For the longest time, fans have been saying that the best way to save Tomorrowland would be to commit to the vision of the future that it initially imagined. That is to say, an intentionally outdated vision of the future. Or in other words, literally retrofuturism. Like how Discoveryland is set in 19th century retrofuturism, why not fully dive into that aesthetic that we now consider 20th century retrofuturism? And, well, would you look at those two taglines? A vista into a world of wondrous ideas. Yesterday's tomorrow, today. If you ask me, it sounds like they're going exactly for this idea. But that wasn't all. Right at the very end of the show, we got this wild reveal that Journey into Imagination at Epcot is going to receive a rework, bringing back not just Figment, but the original legacy character, the Dreamfinder, as well. I think you could argue that earlier announcements like the Paris Space Mountain and Disco Yeti being fixed are improvements for all park goers, but the Dreamfinder? That is the very definition of a deep cut. I wasn't even born yet when the Dreamfinder was part of the parks. Journey into Imagination has had a really rough history as far as Disney rides go, so it would have been really easy to just hollow out that space by now, but instead they're bringing back the vibes of the original version that so many people fell in love with so long ago, and now the new generations can finally experience it too. Once again, I just need to point out this trend of revisions and thematic commitment that's suddenly emerging in the Disney parks. I don't want to say that this is all specifically in response to Fandom Man, but it does really mean something that so many long requested fixes are finally coming to fruition. There were many other moments in the presentation that I didn't go over that also showed how extremely self-aware parks management seems to be.
Oh, whales sing like a happy fox, don't you appear too soon. Yeah, seriously, Disney World. Hatbox goes after Leota, not before. Raleigh Trump would never.
But all in all, I think this is a huge sign. Gears are definitely spinning in the right direction for the Disney parks, and for the first time in quite a while, I feel pretty excited to be at these parks again. Now, who knows, if all goes well, maybe I can do another vlog, and this time I'll be sure to follow through on it. Hello again everyone, and thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. A new video on this channel has been long overdue, but I finally feel encouraged to make more of them again. I know there's a few things from D23 that I didn't touch on in this video, but I hope to circle back to those as they become more relevant in the next few years. I have to thank my past self from 2024 for making so many video drafts that I could just get to work on right away in the meanwhile. No promises yet, but I think I might do one about the other Jules Verne themed land in Tokyo Disney Sea, since Discoveryland is now fresh on my mind. Also, big shout out to my dear friend who brought us on a trip to Disneyland earlier in January. I was still pretty bummed out about the state of the parks at the time, but that trip helped inspire me to get up to date with the parks again. If you're watching this, then thank you. Mwah. Anyway, that's all from me. This is Bardometer signing off, and I hope to see you in the next video.